What would you do if the child of the most feared biker in town collapsed right in front of you, and every second between life and death depended on your hands? Stay with me until the end, because what the Hells Angels did for this single dad afterward shocked the entire town, and changed his life forever. Before we begin, make sure you like this video and subscribe to True Kindness Tales. Your support helps us bring more real, emotional, heart-touching stories to you every day. Jake Miller had never seen himself as a hero. He was just a tired single dad trying to keep life stitched together after his wife passed away 3 years earlier, leaving him alone with a young son who depended on him for everything, from breakfast pancakes to bedtime promises that tomorrow would be easier. On the evening everything changed. Jake had just closed up his small auto shop, rubbing grease off his palms and thinking about whether he had enough leftover chicken at home to make Noah's favorite sandwiches for school. The sunset painted the sky orange as he drove down the quiet road toward the baseball field, humming to distract himself from the heavy weight of bills and responsibilities. But fate had other plans. A line of motorcycles, big ones, loud ones, the kind everyone in town whispered about, were parked crookedly along the shoulder. Their engines still ticked with heat as burly men in leather paced around something on the ground. Jake slowed down, his chest tightening when he saw the unmistakable Hells Angels emblem on their jackets. He'd heard the stories, everyone had, but what he hadn't expected was the sight hidden behind their intimidating circle, a teenage girl lying motionless on the gravel. Her long dark hair was splayed out like a broken halo, her face ghost pale, her chest terrifyingly still. One of the men, a giant with a gray beard and trembling hands, knelt beside her shouting her name, Lily. Lily, come on baby, breathe, and that sound, that raw ache in his voice, shattered every hesitation in Jake's mind. He skidded his truck to a stop, flung the door open, and ran. I'm Jake. What happened? He asked breathlessly. She collapsed. The biker cried. She just fell. She ain't breathing. Jake dropped to his knees. Training he hadn't used since his wife insisted they take CPR classes years ago came rushing back. He checked the girl's pulse. Nothing. He tilted her head back. No breath. Fear clawed at him, but instinct pushed him forward. I can help, he said, and began compressions. The world narrowed to the rhythm of his hands pressing down, his breaths filling her lungs, the silent desperation of a father looming beside him. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The bikers, normally loud and fearless, stood in utter stillness, eyes wide with helplessness. Jake refused to give up. Come on sweetheart, he whispered between compressions. Stay with us. His arms ached, his knees burned against the gravel, but he kept going until suddenly, Lily's body jolted. A gasp tore from her throat. Jake exhaled a shaky breath as her chest rose, her eyelids fluttering open in confusion. The bearded biker crumbled forward, sobbing as he gathered her into his arms. Oh thank God, Lily blinked at Jake with dazed eyes. Did you help me? She whispered. Jake nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The ambulance pulled up moments later. As paramedics lifted her onto the stretcher, Lily reached out and squeezed Jake's hand. It was small, trembling, but full of life, and that was all that mattered. The bikers parted as he stepped back, but none of them looked angry or threatening anymore. Their eyes were something else entirely, stunned, grateful, humbled. Jake got into his truck unaware that this moment, this choice to stop and kneel on a roadside, would ripple through the entire town. By morning, everyone would know his name, not because of pity or tragedy, but because of something powerful, unexpected, and life-changing that was about to happen next. Jake didn't expect anything unusual the next morning when he stepped onto his porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee, rubbing sleep from his eyes and thinking only about waking up Noah for school, but when he opened the front door and froze mid-sip, he wondered if he was still half dreaming, because an entire row of Harley motorcycles, at least 20 of them, lined both sides of his quiet neighborhood street, their chrome bodies shimmering beneath the early sunlight like armor, and every neighbor was either hiding behind curtains or peering nervously from half-open doors. At the front of the line stood the same gray-bearded biker from the night before, his enormous arms crossed, his expression unreadable beneath mirrored sunglasses. Jake's heart thudded, but before he could even decide whether to greet or retreat, the biker stepped forward and lifted his hand, not in threat, but in acknowledgement. Name's Bear, he said in a rumbling voice, removing his glasses to reveal tired, red-rimmed eyes. I'm Lily's father, and we're here because, well, you saved my little girl. Jake blinked, unsure what to say. Bear reached into his vest and pulled out a leather-wrapped package. This is for you, he said, handing it over. Jake hesitated, but the biker nodded. Inside was a handcrafted wooden plaque, beautifully carved with the words, "To Jake Miller, a man of honor. With eternal gratitude. Hell's Angels MC." Jake swallowed hard, touched beyond words, but the surprises weren't over. Bear snapped his fingers, and several bikers carried objects toward Jake's porch, high-quality tools, brand-new tires, restored engine parts, and what looked like a full custom mechanics kit worth far more than Jake earned in a month. "These are gifts," Bear said, "not payment. You didn't hesitate to save my kid. We don't forget things like that." Jake stuttered. I can't accept all this," but Bear cut him off gently. "You can. And you will. Because in our world, respect matters." Jake's throat tightened. But then Bear pulled out a thick envelope and placed it quietly beside the plaque. "This isn't money for you," he said. "This is the receipt proving your shop lease is paid for the next year." Jake nearly dropped it. His shop, the shop he'd been fighting tooth and nail to keep afloat, was safe. "Why would you do this for me?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Bear's jaw clenched as he stared at the ground. "Because you gave me back my daughter when I thought I'd lost her forever," he replied softly. "There's no debt big enough to match that. So let me do what I can." The bikers behind him nodded, some with solemn respect, others with emotional gratitude. And then, in a twist Jake could never have predicted, Bear continued, "And one more thing, Lily's awake and asking for you." Jake felt something warm pierce his chest. "She wants to see me. She won't stop talking about you," Bear said with a half laugh. "Keeps saying, the man who brought me back. So if you got time, we'd be honored to escort you to the hospital." Jake nodded, stunned speechless as the bikers formed a protective formation around his truck. As he climbed in, neighbors peeked from behind blinds, jaws dropping at the surreal scene unfolding. Jake Miller, the quiet single dad, escorted like royalty by the Hells Angels. He followed them to the hospital, the roar of engines echoing through town like a thunderous announcement. Something extraordinary had happened, and everyone was about to hear the story. At the hospital, Jake walked through the sliding doors with 20 leather-clad bikers behind him, a sight so unbelievable that nurses froze mid-clipboard and a doctor nearly dropped his coffee, but none of it mattered when Jake stepped into Lily's room and saw her sitting up in bed, her cheeks flushed with life, her dark hair brushed to the side as she looked toward the door and broke into a fragile, grateful smile that carried more weight than any words could. "You came," she whispered, her voice soft but steady, and Jake nodded as he pulled a chair beside her, feeling a quiet tug at his heart as she reached for his hand, holding it gently, almost reverently, as if it were the single thread tying her back to the moment she returned to the world. Bear stood by the window, watching with the eyes of a father who knew he had come terrifyingly close to losing everything, and when Jake tried to downplay what happened, Lily shook her head weakly and said, "No, you saved me. I heard your voice. I felt you fighting for me." Jake's chest tightened, and for once he allowed the emotion to show. They talked for a long time, about her school, her dreams, how she'd been feeling dizzy lately and ignored it, how terrified her father had been, and Jake found himself growing protective in a way that surprised him. It wasn't romantic, wasn't dramatic, it was simple humanity, the connection between two families whose lives had intersected in a way none of them ever expected. After a while, a doctor entered to give Lily good news: she would recover fully, thanks to immediate CPR. Bear closed his eyes in relief, and several bikers exhaled long, shaky breaths they didn't even realize they'd been holding. As Jake stood to leave, Lily held his hand tighter. "Promise you won't disappear?" she asked. Jake smiled. "I'm not going anywhere." The bikers waited in the hallway as Jake stepped out, their intimidating presence softened by gratitude. Bear approached him, voice low and heavy with sincerity. "Jake, you're family to us now. You ever need anything, you come to us." Jake felt stunned, humbled, overwhelmed. He nodded, not fully trusting his voice. Over the next weeks, the story spread through the town like wildfire. How a single dad saved a biker's daughter, how the feared Hells Angels showed up at his house not for revenge but for gratitude, how they protected his shop, helped fix his equipment, and even escorted his son to school once when Jake's truck broke down. The town had never seen anything like it. People stopped judging the bikers based on rumors. They saw fathers, brothers, loyal men with fierce hearts. And they saw Jake differently too, no longer just the exhausted mechanic struggling to stay afloat, but the man who stepped forward when everyone else would have driven on. One evening, Jake and Noah sat on their porch as motorcycles rumbled past, each biker raising a hand in greeting. Noah looked up at his father with glowing admiration. "Dad, you're kind of a hero," he said. Jake chuckled softly, ruffling his son's hair. "No, kiddo, I just did what was right." But deep inside, he knew the truth. One act of courage had changed all of their lives forever. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, just like the night it all began, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope, family, and the knowledge that kindness, no matter where it comes from, always echoes the loudest. If this heart-touching story moved you, make sure to like the video and subscribe to True Kindness Tales. Your support brings more emotional stories to life every single day.